Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the afternoon session of our Climate Solutions series. I hope you enjoyed the morning's programming. Hope you had a great lunch here at the American Swedish Institute. We're thrilled to be hosted in this beautiful venue. My name is Eric Dayton. I'm sort of up here with two hats on today. One is as a founder and CEO of Askov Finlayson, and I'm proud that we're playing a supporting role in making today's announcement possible. And the other is as co-founder and board president of the Great Northern. And when we started all of this 7+ years ago, we knew that climate change would play a central role in what we were setting out to do. After all, how could we celebrate winter without acknowledging that it's at risk? We decided to call this a Climate Solutions series rather than an Ideas Festival for a reason. Ideas are great, but the time to act on climate is now. And so I always envisioned this being a stage from which major announcements were made. And today we're thrilled to welcome the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation to do just that. This announcement is an exciting first for the Great Northern, but I know it won't be our last. And I want to thank the entire NPLSF team for making today possible. And with that, I'd like to welcome our speakers up to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, for your opening remarks and leadership in the Great Northern Festival and this amazing Climate Solutions series. And selfishly, I want to thank you for your unflinching support for this project and for the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation and our cherished public lands. I'm Tom Irvine, the Executive Director of National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation. We're the only 501c3 philanthropic partner of the 5 U.S. national parks on Lake Superior. Those parks include Grand Portage National Monument, which is located about 150 miles north of Duluth. Apostle Islands National Lakeshore, with headquarters in Bayfield, Wisconsin. Keweenaw National Historical Park in Calumet, Michigan, which is part of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore, spanning about 57 miles of the Upper Peninsula between Munising and Grand Marais, Michigan. And finally, Isle Royale National Park, an island park located just 20 miles from Minnesota, but it happens to be part of Michigan. But we didn't have anything to do with that negotiation. You're here today for a big announcement. And I think we have a video to show to start that.
Where nature is allowed to thrive and majestic lands be set aside for the people. All of them, forever. But what if forever came early? What if our most treasured places disappeared to the changing climate and rising waters? What if we were the last generation to experience America's best idea? But then again, what if? What if we were the ones to stop the tides of change, to confront the threat of a shifting climate? What if we committed to leaving these wild places wild and our cultural resources intact? Not just for us, but everyone who comes after. What if we led the way, decarbonizing our national parks? What if we set a precedent for the nation by powering our parks with clean electricity instead of fossil fuel? What if we put our words into action? What if America's best idea just got better? And what if we stopped asking what if and started asking why not? The National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation is committed to creating a carbon-neutral future for its natural and cultural resources, bringing together government and communities, nonprofits and individuals to eliminate fossil fuel consumption from the National Parks of Lake Superior, the first initiative of its kind. Call it bold, ambitious, or innovative. We may call it America's second best idea.
I guess the cat's out of the bag now. You know what the big announcement is about. But we're here today to announce this bold public-private partnership to decarbonize these 5 national parks. Through the leadership of our organization, NPLSF, these will be the first national parks in the nation to comprehensively and collaboratively move off of fossil fuel in the near term. Our plan is to fully decarbonize the buildings and infrastructure, including the land-based transportation. Park boats and ferries will be included when technology becomes available. Climate resiliency is a top priority of the National Park Service, and Lake Superior National Parks are leading the way. Why are we doing this? Lake Superior represents 10% of the fresh water on Earth and is one of the fastest warming lakes in the world. With declining cold water fisheries, unstable lake ice, and violent storms, the lake has battered docks, marinas, as well as lighthouses and other cultural treasures. The time to lead with tangible action and build climate resiliency into the Lake Superior National Parks is right now. How are we going to do this? A 9-month comprehensive engineering assessment has been completed by Willdan E3, a leading environmental engineering company, to transition each park to clean, renewable energy using technology that is readily available. Solar panel systems, PV battery storage, air and ground source heat pumps, light-duty electric cars, trucks, snowmobiles, ATVs, and meticulous attention to basic energy efficiency and conservation. These are trusted, proven strategies and a hallmark of practicality. Decarbonizing will save money over the long term, but requires an estimated $15 million investment to reach our goal of cutting greenhouse gases to zero in this phase of the project. Much of the funding will be available through these parks through new and existing federal programs such as the Inflation Reduction Act, bipartisan infrastructure legislation, and the Great America Outdoor Act. NPLSF will be recruiting sponsors, creating partnerships, and raising money to fill the gaps and maximize the educational and workforce development value of this project. Decarbonizing is not only the right thing to do for our 5 parks on Lake Superior, but will act as a realistic model for other national parks and public lands. It will also inspire park visitors to take action themselves. Once you see the visitor center at Grand Portage National Monument on the border of Canada, heated by air source heat pumps instead of propane, you realize it can be done in your own home. When you are standing on the shores of Isle Royale National Park at dusk, as the stars slowly emerge, illuminating the green of the green trees and the darkening indigo waters, you won't hear that drone of a diesel generator. What you'll hear is the deafening silence of the most remote wilderness area in the continental United States. The Decarb the Parks project is not an aspirational dream. It's happening as we speak. Thanks to Askov Finlayson and their significant support to this project, I want to also thank the National Park Foundation and the National Parks Conservation Association for providing capacity support to NPLSF and to enable us to even manage this major project. We are indebted to the staff and superintendents of all 5 parks, particularly Denise Swanke from Isle Royale National Park, who you will hear from shortly. Denise has much experience in the park system and is the right one to lead this project internally. Before she began at Isle Royale, she helped lead operations at Denali National Park Reserve, Mount Rushmore National Memorial, Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument, and others. She has worked at the Washington, D.C. headquarters of the National Park Service, and as part of the environmental protection, she was an environmental protection specialist at Grand Canyon National Park. You'll hear from her shortly. But first, I can't adequately begin to thank our next speaker, United States Senator Tina Smith, for her work as a climate leader. Since coming to the United States Senate in 2018, U.S. Senator Smith has been a fierce advocate for taking action on climate emergency. She has been at the forefront of crafting responsible environmental policy to protect freshwater resources and help lead the way to clean energy economy. Last fall, her leadership was instrumental in passing an Inflation Reduction Act, which included some of the most significant climate legislation in our nation's history. Today, we're excited to have her be part of this announcement of this project, which stands to benefit from that historic law. Please join me in welcoming to the podium our United States Senator Tina Smith.
Good afternoon, everybody. I cannot imagine a better place to be on this frigid, cold Minnesota winter day than here celebrating this just terrific project. Thank you to Great Northern, to Eric Dayton and Askov Finlayson for your leadership on this project and just more broadly. To Tom and Dinah and Sarah and all of the folks at the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation, to Denise Swanky for your leadership at Isle Royale, and also to the Grand Portage Band of Chippewa and other tribal nations for your leadership on this project and your collaboration. So congratulations to everybody for this terrific project, and I am so glad to be able to be here to help you celebrate this today. It is meaningful that we make this announcement during the Climate Solutions series of the Great Northern Festival, which is dedicated to celebrating winter and making the case for what we need to do to protect winter. So today we're announcing a partnership and a project to decarbonize the buildings and the operations of 5 national parks around Lake Superior. Isle Royale National Park, which is one of the 4th largest lake islands in the world and a UNESCO International Biosphere Reserve, and it is in Michigan, but it's mostly with us. The Apostle Islands National Lakeshore, the Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore, how do I say this, Tom? The Keweenaw National Historic Park, and the Grand Portage National Monument in Minnesota. It is important to recognize that Lake Superior and the lands around it stretch all across what is Anishinaabe land. And this Grand Portage National Monument and the Isle Royale National Park is operated through a co-management between Grand Portage Band of Lake Superior Chippewa. We have so much to learn from tribal nations and native people about how to care for our earth and how to protect our natural and cultural resources. And so it is important that in this project we are providing for a strong government-to-government relationship with tribal nations, which is the best way forward. And I am so glad that the National Parks Foundation is working closely with Grand Portage to make sure that this is implemented in the way that it should be. Now, if you love Lake Superior, as I do, you know it as one of the most beautiful, breathtaking, dramatic places in the world. An inland freshwater sea that is exceptional in all ways. And if you love Lake Superior, as I do, you know that our warming Earth is threatening this precious place, which is warming faster, as Tom said, on average than many of the world's largest lakes, at a rate 3 times faster than the global average. And this warming around Lake Superior is creating a ripple effect of environmental degradation that is affecting the lake's ecosystem. Certainly extreme weather events, but also more invasive species, declining fish populations, and harmful algae blooms, all of which are having a negative impact and changing the relationship that we all have with this most precious resource. So this project today is taking action on climate change in a very specific way. And it is a bold vision that we for what we can do when we take action to address the climate emergency. And this project is powerful in two ways. First, it takes direct action to decarbonize these 5 parks by replacing fossil fuel energy with clean energy and renewable energy with solar and batteries and heat pumps and other energy efficiency and green power technologies that are available right now. This is not some pie in the sky, we'll be able to do this when the technology is there solution. This is a right now solution. And of course, this is not only going to reduce emissions that is generated from the park, but it is also going to reduce the operating costs of the park, which is going to be a benefit for years and years and years to come. So that's the first reason why this idea is so powerful. But the second one is this. Several years from now, when people come to visit these incredible, precious national parks, they're going to see what it looks like to deploy this technology and the benefits that we all can achieve by doing so. It will be not only a demonstration project, but a galvanizing project for people who can see what we can do. People who will be saying, wait a minute, like you're telling me that in this coldest climate anywhere nearly in the country, we can use heat pumps in the wintertime to heat our homes? Like, I want to know more about that. That is also bold thinking, and it is the second reason why this project has so much power to address the climate emergency. So this is where the Inflation Reduction Act comes in, because this law, which is the most monumental and transformative legislation that we have ever passed to address the climate emergency, will help us to put these technologies into place, primarily by the tax credits that we will be able to use to install those heat pumps, to do the energy efficiency, to make sure that we're installing solar panels that will help to drive this decarbonization. Now, you may ask yourself, why is it that tax credits are of benefit for a national park organized and done together with tribal nations and a nonprofit that, last time I checked, don't pay any taxes? The reason is because in the Inflation Reduction Act, we were able to accomplish something that says that if you are a nonprofit and you are installing these kinds of technologies, you will get direct payment for that. You don't have to engage in some sort of a complicated financing scheme in order to get the benefit of those tax credits. That is really revolutionary, and it will speed us on this transition because we know what we need to do. We know exactly what we need to do when it comes to this climate emergency. We need to clean up our power sector so that our electricity is coming from clean sources. We need to electrify everything that we can as quickly as we can. And then we need to make sure that we are using the most energy efficient buildings and cars and houses and everything in order to speed us down that path of the clean energy transition. There is so much power in that, pun intended, not only for the national parks, but for our entire country and our entire world. I am so proud of what we are doing here in Minnesota. When it comes to the climate emergency, we can follow or we can lead. And Minnesota is showing that we are ready to lead again. I can't let this moment pass without acknowledging that right now, this week, Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan and our leadership in Minnesota State Legislature are working to take bold action to move Minnesota to the forefront again when it comes to clean energy with their proposal, their plan, which will pass, I believe, to get us to 100% clean power in Minnesota by 2040. What that means for our state and our country, it means cheaper power. It means more jobs. It means better public health, particularly from the communities that have been hardest hit by the pollution of fossil fuels. It means a huge drop in emissions. It means progress. So this project that we are celebrating today is a powerful example of what we can do, what action we can take, the strength of our collective and individual action to change the trajectory of what's happening on this globe, to limit our warming to no more than 1.5 degrees centigrade in order to be able to make sure that my grandchildren and yours will still have winter. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here today with all of you. This is such an exciting project, and as I said at the beginning, I can't imagine a better place to be right now than with all of you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Good afternoon. I have, for once in my life, I actually made notes. I don't typically do that. I don't know whether you should be afraid or heartened by that. But my first one was all about thanks, and I think we've covered that fairly well. None of us would be here talking about this amazing project today if it weren't for a lot of work. And I'd like to just start with a very short story about how I think this all started, which was the very first time I had the opportunity. Let's see, this would have been the fall of 2020 when I started at Isle Royal with Tom, and he said, I know you haven't been here very long, Denise, but what's your priority for the park? I'm thinking, okay, my brain's still on a road that just fell off the side of the mountain in Alaska in a place called Denali, and I just drove through Canada during COVID, which I can't recommend. I hope you didn't have that experience. And here I am on this amazing body of water, and I'm just in awe. And you want to know what my priorities are. And I know enough. I did work in DC, I think he said, right? Like, you need to have an answer to that, even though you haven't been there a year and really got your feet on the ground. My answer was, Tom, it's the same as everywhere else in the country. We have infrastructure issues at Isle Royal National Park. And you know what? Every national park has infrastructure issues. But holy moly, have we got them here. We've got them because we're on a big lake. We're only open for a few months during the summer. We have docks that are exposed to all these changing water levels. We had a period of low water and then high water and then low water, and that wreaks a bit of havoc with infrastructure. So we have a lot of issues, and it's just amazing to me in the relatively short period of time from that day to where we are right now, all of a sudden with an excellent report that some good folks up here, if you want the numbers, I'm not your numbers person, but we've got people here who can help you with questions. But they pulled together all this information. Chris Baker, raise your hand. Where's Chris? Chris came and visited all 5 of these parks last year and helped pull together massive amounts of information. I was actually surprised the report wasn't longer. What I'm going to do is just walk you through a little bit of each of the 5 parks and show you a little, well, or tell you a little bit about how we're going to start making these transitions. And I do also have to say I'm a bit worried about the headlines on Monday because there are a lot of national parks, probably you've been to some, that you have seen photovoltaic systems and things like that. We're not the only ones doing this. It's the approach at a multi-park regional level that we're doing that is revolutionary, I think, and really so exciting, as you've heard from the Senator and from Tom. So who's running my slides over here? Okay, well, there you go. I'm not reading it, but there's a National Park Service mission. If you don't know what we're about, you probably would not be in the room here today. So I think we can all understand the importance of this topic of climate change, adaptation, resistance in the context of the National Park Service mission. And also in the context of 2 of the 7 goals established by our director, Chuck Sams, who was unable to be here with us today. And I am a poor substitute, but I'm happy to share with you that these are 2 of the priorities that he set out for the National Park Service leadership immediately on coming in office. And it's obvious that this project supports these priorities. And now we're going to talk a little bit about how at each of the 5 parks. So I think we get a nice image here. What Tom didn't mention is these 5 parks are a grouping called a zone in terms of National Park Service management. We have other parks as well involved. So one of the ways that I think Lake Superior and these 5 parks are going to ripple this effect is through the other parks in our immediate zone of influence. Those are Voyagers, Effigy Mounds National Monument, Ice Age National Scenic Trail, and of course in your own backyard, if you're from the immediate area, the MISS, we call it, and the St. Croix National Scenic Riverways. So all of those parks are ones that work with these 5 parks on a very regular basis. The superintendents, our facility managers, our interpretive and education specialists are really leaning in and trying to support each other in the work that we do. So we're excited to be part of this project with the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation because, like I said, we're going to start this here and see how far out we can grow. Next slide, please. Oh, no, we'll go back. Just one. We'll talk about how each of these are getting lined up to be implemented at different stages in the parks. Go ahead. So, Apostle Islands National Lake Shore, right above me here, has approximately 19 buildings that are going to be retrofit. At Apostle Islands, they're a combination of grid-tied buildings and off-grid locations. So Royal has the unique distinction of being the only one that's entirely off-grid. But at Apostles, 19 buildings for retrofits of some type. Maybe that's just changing out lights, and maybe it's adding some timers to those lights and things like that. Also, electric vehicles. As vehicles come up for replacement, we want to replace them with electric vehicles to the greatest extent possible. And this coming summer at an area, okay, who knows Little Sand Bay? Anybody been there? Okay, we got a few of you. Great. There is one Park Service housing area out there at Little Sand Bay that is going to be set up on a photovoltaic system. And that's one of their only outlying sites that isn't yet on a PV system. So we're excited about that. And I know Tom mentioned that this project is really focused on land, but we are talking about water parks, right? So Apostles is one of the parks in this grouping that has about 13 vessels. We're not talking about vessels yet with this project, but that's a $4.2 million reinvestment. Were we in a position to talk about vessels and electrification and decarbonizing boats on Lake Superior, but we're not there with technology. So Apostle Islands and then Grand Portage National Monument has about 10 buildings. Again, a mix. They're mostly grid tied, but they do use a lot of propane heat at this time. And we have the opportunity to use the cold climate heat pumps in that location, as well as electric vehicles. And another thing that I think Grand Portage represents a really neat opportunity is the purchase of renewables. So we're a government agency, right? We're bureaucrats. Love it or not, we are. Things like what I can do in my personal life when I get a power bill and I have a little box I can check to pay an extra X amount a month to have my electricity come from a renewable source. That's not necessarily that choice that we have using taxpayer funds to do that, right? To pay above and beyond for an optional renewable. So I think that that's one of the really great features that this report highlighted is we should be able to make that choice. And we're going to figure out how. And it is something that can be replicated across the country. And so I think that's very exciting. And Grand Portage being grid tied is one of those locations. The next slide is Isle Royale and Keweenaw National Historical Park. And if you have not been to what we call Kiwi, I highly recommend it. It's an amazing place. They are getting ready to sort of rebuild an envelope within a 29,000 square foot warehouse. And unfortunately, I didn't have a good picture of the warehouse. This is a Quincy mine site. But the warehouse is going to be, it's a museum collection and storage facility for 3 parks, Grand Portage, Pictured Rocks, Isle Royale, and Keweenaw. And that facility design happening in 2023, looking at 2025 construction, is going to be able to take advantage of the types of technology that were highlighted in this report done by Roldan and E3. So at Kiwi, that's one of the things they're doing. They're also looking at an agreement with the state of Michigan to have a location just down the hill from this Quincy mine site. Here is the old smelter location on the canal. And they're talking about how to have a proving ground for things like electric boats. So very exciting, even though they're not a boating park. And then at Isle Royale, we represent the largest amount of buildings to retrofit. We have over 80 on the islands. We have many more buildings than that. A lot of them will never see anything resembling electricity, but those are the ones that are currently, at least some of the are operating off-grid. We have 2 existing large photovoltaic systems that are in various states of operation, and so we anticipate rehabbing and adding onto probably those 2 systems. And then most of our employee housing is on its own island. It's called Mott Island, and that island does not currently have anything other than 2 beloved or hated, depending on who you ask, I guess, diesel generators. So we are looking forward to decarbonizing the island that we actually live on during the summer months. And we also found through this work that most of our electric use is actually for hot water. We have a lodge at Rock Harbor, so we have guests coming in, and guests like hot showers. And if you've been backpacking on Isle Royale, you probably remember when you got your hot shower off the trail, right? It's a nice thing. Also a nice thing after working all day. And so we're excited at Isle Royale as one of the immediate things we can do is be looking at heat pump hot water tanks that serve multiple functions. So that's our example. And then we will move on to Pictured Rocks. Pictured Rocks, they have about 15 buildings that they're going to be looking at. 4 of those are off-grid. So there's opportunities, again, for the purchase of renewable energy through existing utility companies, as well as bringing those off-grid locations onto clean energy. Electric vehicles, again, we have a progression at every park that has the opportunity for electric vehicles to think about things like UTVs, to think about the sedans that we might drive to a place like Minneapolis, for example. And then lastly, we would look at our larger vehicles that we might tow a really big boat with, or like a state bed truck or something like that, right? We're not going to start with the most complicated vehicles in terms of electrifying the fleet, but we have a lot of other vehicles to use. Also, one of my examples from Pictured Rocks just came from a conversation with the superintendent there this week. I was talking to David, and it's on, the screen and everything. I'm like, oh, hi, you got a nice snowbank at your window. As always, it looks great. He says, yeah, but I'm in a 100-year-old building. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. So am I. He's like, but ours doesn't have any insulation, and I got single pane windows. And I'm like, oh, that's why you're bundled up like that, David. Sorry. So when you saw the list earlier in the slideshow of everything from LED bulbs and insulation to the electric vehicles and the retrofits and the photovoltaic systems, that's why this project, it's comprehensive, right? It's looking at all of that. It's looking at the most basic things like insulation and windows. But there are complications with putting modern windows in a historic structure, of course. So nothing comes easy, and unfortunately nothing comes cheap. But we have a lot of opportunity here, and we're excited about it. And I'm going to close with just a couple of comments, if I can find them here. I put them all in order, but here's my last one for you. One of the things that, again, as I talked to the superintendents preparing to come meet with you all today, was the theme was, it's easy to buy something relatively, we need a new vehicle. Okay, well, we got an extra 10 grand, so we can make it an electric vehicle instead of just replacing it in kind. It's harder for us as an agency to operate and maintain, hire staffing to do project management, train people to do the operations and maintenance. I remember working at Little Bighorn Battlefield when the State Department of Transportation was tearing down and rebuilding all these rest stops along the highway. And I was talking to one of my DOT colleagues. I was just blown away. I'm like, what's wrong with that building? Why are you tearing it down? He's like, well, it's at a 50-year life cycle. We're going to tear it down. And I'm like, but we're in hundreds and hundreds of year-old buildings, and we don't get to tear them down, nor should we always. But, it's just we don't operate as a government in the same way, and I'm not suggesting we should, but we do need to put energy, prioritization, and effort into maintaining what we have. And when we have good information like we have now, to bringing those facilities into the modern era, right? Let's do it the right thing at the right time. And let's do it with off-the-shelf products that we can maintain and take care of. So what can you do? You remember the 2016, the National Park Service Centennial theme was all about find your park. That's one of the most important things you can do. It can be a city park, it can be your state park, it can be Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore. Find your park and love it. any way you can. That might mean volunteerism. It might mean at Isle Royal getting involved in our wilderness stewardship planning effort this year. It might mean philanthropy. It might mean telling your granddaughter that, hey, have you ever thought about being a park ranger or being a trail crew member or being a scientist who works in places like this? There are all kinds of things that you can do as an ambassador and a steward of our national parks. And that influence just in these 5 parks is well over 2 million people a year. So I want to leave you with that. And the last thing that I'm going to say, I had to write down the name of it so I didn't get it wrong. The Power of the Youth Voice is the next program that's happening here this afternoon at 2 o'clock. So that's something you can do, is continue to learn from those who are younger than us and maybe smarter than us and full of all kinds of energy and great ideas, because that's just incredible to hear the passion and the professionalism that those folks are bringing to the table. So I think you're going to enjoy the presentation this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Senator Smith. I couldn't be happier for the remarks that you both made. I just want to close by once again thanking Eric Dayton and Askov Finlayson for sharing this vision. I want to thank the 5 park superintendents. Although there's 4 of them that aren't here today, they've all put in an extreme amount of work to go into this, to plan out this project and work with our energy engineers and be on Zoom, on countless Zoom calls and last minute calls for me. So it's a great bunch. I also want to thank our board of directors for National Parks and Lake Superior Foundation. I've got a couple of my board members here today. Fawn Bernhard Norvell, our board chair, is sitting back there, and I think Andrew McElry is here somewhere, but there you are. I also want to point out they've come up in the conversations a number of times, but I want to point out a couple of our project engineer partners in this project with Wildan E3. Snoo Price and Chris Baker, give us a wave. And if you want to get into the details of all this, get into the weeds, they'll take you down a rabbit hole of everything related to this project, or make it easy. What's next for this project? Well, the work has already started within the parks to plan and schedule this work. Coordination is happening between all layers of the National Park Service to bring this project to fruition. And there's a lot of layers, I'll tell you that. I'm learning a new level of patience and respect for how our government operates. So there is hope, and I see it in the National Park Service. National Parks Lake Superior Foundation will continue to grow this public-private partnership by raising funds, by raising funds to continue the project management and create equitable job training that supports these new technologies and public education. What can you do? And Denise said this too, visit the parks, enjoy America's best idea. Stay informed, spread the word on this important work. We can share this example with other parks and public spaces and just take it home with you and think about how you can do it at home. So you can also go to our website at nplsf.org, and whoever can spit out NPLSF on their first try is gonna win something. I'm not sure what, but it's something. We do. We have hats and all kinds of things. But anyway, so thank you, and I just want to give a shout out for our next presentation. It's exciting, as Denise said. It's next up in the Climate Solutions series. Jawari Jama and Isra Hersey are here, and they'll be talking about youth leadership in climate movement in Minnesota and beyond. And if you'd like to stay for that session and have not registered or checked in, please do so at the registration table outside. And other than that, thank you very much for being here today.
It's so great to be here. It's great. I appreciate it. Oh, thank you.